Dad, Trevor and I got married. My daughter, Maddie's, voice chirped over the phone, dripping with a sweetness I knew was counterfeit. She had excluded me from the most important day of her life, calling it a private ceremony for truly important people. Yet in the very next breath, she demanded the keys to my beach house, my sanctuary, the last living piece of her mother, for her honeymoon. She thought I was just a sad, lonely old man she could discard and use at will. So I smiled into the phone. And then, I made a call to give away her entire inheritance. The lesson was about to begin. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. Before the betrayal, there was the beach house. To my daughter Madison, it was an asset, a line item on a future inheritance spreadsheet. To me, it was a cathedral of memories. Built on a quiet stretch of Cape Cod, its cedar shingles weathered gray by salt and sun, it was the last great project I shared with my wife, Eleanor. As a landscape architect, my life's work was to shape the earth. But that house was where Eleanor shaped me. She designed the garden, a chaotic masterpiece of wild roses and hardy hydrangeas that defiantly bloomed in the coastal winds. Every summer, from the time Maddie was a toddler until she left for college, this house was our universe. I remember her small hands, sticky with saltwater taffy, digging in the sand for seashells. I remember the scent of Eleanor's sunscreen, as she'd read to Maddie on the porch swing, their laughter mixing with the cry of the gulls. This house wasn't made of wood and nails. It was built from moments like those. It was where we measured Maddie's height against a doorframe, a ladder of pencil marks charting her ascent from a little girl into a young woman. After Eleanor passed from a sudden illness 2 years ago, the house became my solace. Tending to her unruly garden was my way of continuing a conversation with her. The scent of the salt spray, the rhythmic crash of the waves. It was where I felt closest to her, where our story was still alive in every grain of sand and every weathered floorboard. So when the phone rang that Tuesday afternoon, I answered with a heart full of those memories. It was Maddie. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, a silence that had become painfully common since she'd met Trevor. But the sight of her name still sparked a familiar fatherly hope. "Dad, hi!" Her voice was unnaturally bright, the polished, high-energy tone she used for her event planning clients, not her father. "Maddie, sweetheart." "It's good to hear your voice," I said, a genuine warmth spreading through me, foolishly ignoring the warning bells. "I have the most amazing news. You're not going to believe it. Trevor and we got married." The words hit me with the force of an unexpected wave, a sudden icy shock that knocked the air from my lungs. Married? My only daughter was married? I sank into the armchair by the window, the one where Eleanor used to sit. "Married?" I managed to say, my voice a faint echo of my thoughts. "When? Why didn't you tell me? I would have been there in a heartbeat." "Oh, it was last week," she said, her tone breezy and dismissive, as if discussing a minor change of plans. "Just a quick thing at City Hall, super spontaneous. We wanted to keep it really small and intimate, you know, just for the people who are truly important. Truly important." The phrase hung in the air between us, a poisoned dart. I, her father, the man who had walked her to her first day of school, who had held her through fevers and heartbreaks, who had financed the education that led to the career she was so proud of, was not on that list. I was just an afterthought, a ghost from a life she was trying to outrun. I struggled to keep my voice steady, to hide the tremor of a heartbreaking. "I see. Well, congratulations, Maddie. I wish you and Trevor all the happiness in the world." My words felt like a betrayal. To myself, a placid lie in the face of such profound disrespect. "Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd understand," she chirped, completely tone-deaf to the wound she had just inflicted. And then, without a single breath of hesitation, she delivered the final blow, the demand that would ignite the firestorm. Anyway, the reason I'm calling is, we're planning our honeymoon, and we thought the beach house would be absolutely perfect. It's so romantic. Can you send me the keys? We were thinking of heading down this Friday. I was silent, stunned into a state of cold, clear shock. She had not only erased me from one of the most significant moments of her life, but she now felt entitled to celebrate that exclusion in the very sanctuary of my most sacred memories. She wanted to bring Trevor, a vapid stockbroker whose ambition was only matched by his arrogance, into the home built by my love for her mother. It wasn't just a request, it was a desecration. It was a final, callous declaration that my feelings, my memories, my very existence were irrelevant to her. All that mattered was what I could provide. She mistook my stunned silence for acquiescence. "Dad, you there? It's just for a week. We'll be super careful with the place." Something inside me, a dam of patience and quiet grief that had been holding for years, finally broke. But it didn't break into a flood of rage. It broke into a chilling, absolute calm. The calm of a man who has nothing left to lose because the thing he valued most has just been rendered worthless by the very person he created it for. "Oh, a honeymoon," I said, and my voice sounded foreign to my own ears, smooth and steady as polished stone. "Of course, my dear. A celebration is in order. Let me see what I can arrange. I'll call you back." "Great. Thanks, Dad, you're the best," she exclaimed, and hung up, already dreaming of a romantic getaway she believed was hers. By right, she thought my calm was weakness. She was wrong. The quiet of a man pushed to the edge is not the sound of surrender. It is the sound of a chessboard being set in the mind. And in that moment, I knew my opening move. I didn't reach for the phone to call her back. I reached for the number of the one person who would understand, the one person who had witnessed Maddie's long, slow descent into selfish ambition. I called my sister, Janet. The game had begun. The phone call to my older sister, Janet, was short and precise. She answered on the first ring, her voice as sharp and no-nonsense as the legal brief she used to draft. Janet, a retired litigator, had never been fooled by Trevor's manufactured charm, and her assessment of Maddie's character had always been unsparing. I relayed the conversation, every word, from the City Hall wedding to the demand for the keys. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The facts themselves were a brutal indictment. She listened without interruption, her silence a brewing storm. When I finished, the first words out of her mouth were not of sympathy, but of action. "That little viper," she hissed, the venom in her voice a strange comfort to me. "After everything you and Eleanor did for her, she has his mother's grace and Trevor's greed, a lethal combination. So what are you going to do, Sammy? Let her walk all over you again and hand over the keys?" "No, Janet," I said, the calmness in my own voice surprising me. "I'm going to do something Eleanor would have wanted. I'm going to protect the memory of that house, and to do that, I'm going to give it away." There was a pause on the other end, the sound of a sharp legal mind processing a completely unexpected move. "Give it away? To whom? Don't tell me you're donating it to some sea turtle foundation." "No," I said, the next piece of my plan slotting perfectly into place. "I need your help. I need you and Chloe to meet me at my lawyer's office tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock sharp." Another pause, this one filled with confusion. "Chloe? My Chloe? What does my daughter have to do with this mess?" My niece, Chloe, was the symbolic antithesis of my daughter. Where Maddie was polished, Chloe was authentic. Where Maddie curated a life for social media, Chloe lived one. She was a freelance artist, a painter whose canvases were filled with the raw, windswept beauty of the very coastline Maddie saw as a backdrop for a luxury vacation. Chloe lived in a small, cluttered studio apartment. Her wealth measured not in bank statements, but in tubes of oil paint and stacks of well-read books. She was kind, empathetic, and possessed a quiet strength that Maddie had always mistaken for weakness. For years, Maddie had treated her cousin with a thinly veiled contempt, a toxic mixture of pity and jealousy. She'd called her the poor artist, making snide remarks about Chloe's secondhand clothes and lack of a real career. In her relentless pursuit of a curated, Instagram-perfect life, Maddie hated Chloe for being authentically, unapologetically herself. And that, I realized, made Chloe the perfect instrument of poetic justice. Maddie has always looked down on her, I explained to Janet. She sees Chloe's freedom as a lack of ambition. She thinks art and memories are worthless commodities. I think it's time Maddie learned that true value isn't measured in stock portfolios or designer handbags. I'm going to give Chloe a gift, a very significant gift. Janet was silent for a full 10 seconds. I could almost hear the gears of her mind turning, the litigator in her analyzing the strategy, the sister in her understanding the profound emotional current beneath it. Then, she let out a low whistle. "Sammy," she said, a note of pure, unadulterated admiration in her voice. "You magnificent old fox. We'll be there." The next morning, the lawyer's office was a stage of quiet anticipation. My attorney, a man named Bill Peterson, had been a friend for decades. He'd handled my will, Eleanor's estate, and he knew the significance of the beach house. He had the paperwork ready, his expression somber but supportive. Janet sat beside me, a bastion of strength. And across the table, Chloe sat nervously, her hands twisting in the lap of her paint-splattered jeans, completely unsure why she had been summoned. "Chloe," I began, my voice gentle, "I know this is sudden, but I have a proposition for you." "A proposition, Uncle Sam?" she asked, her brow furrowed with confusion. "I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?" "Quite the opposite, my dear," I said. I slid the thick vellum document across the polished mahogany table. "I want to give you the beach house." Her eyes widened. She stared at the document, then back at me, a look of pure disbelief on her face. "What? No, Uncle Sam, I can't. That's your house. It's Aunt Eleanor's house. It's full of your memories." "Exactly," I said, my voice catching slightly. "And that is why I'm giving it to you. Eleanor would have wanted it to belong to someone who understands that. Someone who sees the garden she planted, not the square footage of the lot. Someone who will cherish the memories, not calculate the property value." "But, Maddie," she whispered, the name hanging in the air, like a ghost. "Maddie has made her choice," I said, my voice firming. "She has chosen a different path, one that doesn't value what that house represents. This isn't a burden, Chloe. It's your freedom, a place to create, to think, to live without the pressure of the world Maddie worships. All I ask is that you fill it with art and life, and never ever let it become just an asset." Tears streamed down her face. She looked at her mother, who gave her a single firm nod. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a gratitude so profound it was humbling. I accept, Uncle Sam," she whispered. "I'll take care of it. I promise." Bill Peterson slid the pen towards me. With a steady hand, I signed my name, the ink flowing smoothly onto the page. I, Samuel Brooks, in sound mind and body, hereby gift the property at 11 Ocean Drive to my niece, Chloe Vance. The transfer was immediate, irrevocable, and ironclad. The deed was done. As we left the office, Janet put a hand on my arm. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," I said, a cold, clear sense of purpose settling over me. "We let the trap spring itself." The next 2 days were a masterclass in controlled deception. I had to play the part of the compliant, slightly befuddled father Maddie expected me to be. When she called on Thursday afternoon to confirm the plan, I answered with a voice I hoped sounded weary but resigned. "Hi, Dad. Just checking in," she said, the false brightness in her tone grating on my nerves. "So, we're all set for Friday? Trevor is so excited. I told him all about the summers we spent there." The casual way she invoked those sacred memories as a tool for her new life was like a fresh twist of the knife, but I held my composure. "Yes, Maddie, all set," I said. "The key is under the ceramic frog by the back door, just where your mother always used to leave it. You remember the one of..." "Course, perfect," she said, relieved. "Oh, and Dad, don't worry about tidying up or anything, we can handle it. Just, give us our space." "I understand completely," I said, the double meaning of my words entirely lost on her. "I won't be there. The house is all yours for the week. Have a wonderful honeymoon, sweetheart." After the call, I sat in the quiet of my study, the silence a stark contrast to the storm of emotions within me. It was one thing to sign a legal document in the sterile environment of a lawyer's office. It was another to lie to my own daughter, to actively participate in the illusion that would lead to her downfall. But it was necessary, for the lesson. To be absolute, she had to arrive full of arrogance and entitlement. She had to walk into her humiliation with the full confidence of a conqueror. My final call was to Chloe. She was understandably overwhelmed and a little terrified. "Uncle Sam, what am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice a bundle of nerves. "What do I say when they show up? She can be really cruel." "I know she can be," I said, my voice softening. "Which is why you won't be cruel in return. You will be calm. You will be polite. And you will be the legal owner of the property. That is all the strength you need. You are not there to gloat or to fight. You are there simply to exist, to paint, to be yourself in your new home. The truth is your shield, Chloe. You don't have to shout it. You just have to stand behind it." I gave her a simple script. Let them arrive. Let them state their purpose. Then, calmly and kindly, inform them of the change in ownership. I told her to have a copy of the deed, which my lawyer had couriered to her, ready. "Show them the paper," I said. "And then, whatever happens next, you call me. Do not engage with them further." "Okay, Uncle Sam," she said, taking a deep breath. "I can do that. For you, and for Aunt Eleanor." With the pieces in place, all that was left was to wait. Friday felt like the longest day of my life. I didn't leave my house. I couldn't eat. I paced my study, tracking the hours, imagining their journey. I pictured them packing their expensive luggage, the kind designed for first-class travel, not for a life built on lies. I pictured them in their luxury sedan, probably a leased model. They could barely afford, laughing and planning the future they intended to steal from me. Maddie, I was sure, would be narrating the trip for her social media followers. She lived her life through a lens, curating an image of effortless success. I could almost see the captions now, honeymoon bliss at the family estate. So blessed. The thought was nauseating. Around 4 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. "They're here." My heart leaped into my throat. I sat down, my hands suddenly clammy. I typed back a single word, "Breathe," then I waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I imagined the scene playing out on that sun-drenched porch, the shock, the disbelief, the inevitable explosion of rage from Maddie. I braced myself for Chloe's panicked call, but the call that came 5 minutes later wasn't from Chloe. It was from Maddie. I let it ring 3 times before answering, composing my voice into a mask of placid ignorance. "Maddie, is everything all right? Sweetheart, did you get in okay?" Her voice was not the enraged shriek I had expected. It was a low, dangerous hiss, the sound of a snake coiling to strike. "Dad," she said, each word dripping with venom. "What is Chloe doing here?" "Chloe?" I replied, feigning confusion. "My niece, Chloe. I have no idea. Why would she be at the beach house?" "Don't play dumb with me," she snarled. "She's sitting on the porch, painting like she owns the place. She told us. She told us you gave it to her." "Gave it to her?" I let out a small, bewildered laugh. "Maddie, that's ridiculous. The house has been in our family for generations. Why on earth would I give it to Chloe?" I was baiting her, forcing her to articulate the absurdity of the situation from her perspective, forcing her to confront the truth she couldn't yet accept. "That's what I want to know," she screamed, her voice finally breaking. "She has papers, Dad. Some kind of deed. You need to call her right now and tell her to get out. This is my honeymoon. Trevor is furious. You are ruining everything." "Hold on, Maddie, calm down," I said, my voice a soothing balm on her fury. "There must be some kind of terrible mistake. Let me make a call and figure out what's going on. I'll sort this out, I promise." I hung up before she could say another word. I didn't call Chloe. I didn't need to. I simply sat back in my chair and looked out my window at the setting sun. The trap had not just been sprung, she had willingly and arrogantly walked right into the center of it. She still believed this was a mistake that could be sorted out, a problem I would fix for her, as I always had. She hadn't yet grasped the fundamental truth. I was not the fixer anymore. I was the architect of her reckoning. The real confrontation was yet to come. The scene, as Chloe later described it to me, was one of perfect, ironic tranquility. She had been sitting on the porch swing, a small watercolor canvas propped on her knees, painting the dance of light on the waves. A gentle sea breeze rustled the leaves of the wild roses Eleanor had planted. The air was filled with the scent of salt and sun-warmed wood. It was a picture of absolute peace. And into that peace, the screech of tires on the gravel driveway was a violent intrusion. Maddie's gleaming black convertible, a car I knew was leased far beyond her means, pulled up with aggressive speed. She and Trevor emerged, not like happy honeymooners, but like invaders storming a beachhead. They were dressed in designer resort wear, carrying luggage plastered with luxury brand logos. They were performing the role of the wealthy elite, AIE, role they believed was their birthright. They stopped dead at the foot of the porch steps, their faces a mixture of confusion and annoyance when they saw Chloe. "Chloe!" Maddie's voice was sharp, cutting through the peaceful afternoon air. "What on earth are you doing here? This is a private week. It's our honeymoon." Chloe, true to her promise, remained calm. She set her paintbrush down and offered them a small, polite smile. "Oh, is it? Congratulations, Maddie. I didn't know." Trevor, ever the aggressor, stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Our honeymoon," he repeated, as if speaking to a particularly slow child. "Which means you need to leave. Now. This is the Brooks family house." "I know it is," Chloe replied, her voice still gentle. "That's why I'm here. I'm just getting settled into my new home." I could almost feel the tectonic plates of Maddie's reality begin to shift. Your home?" she stammered, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in her throat. "What are you talking about? Are you house-sitting? Did my father ask you to check on the place? Because if he did, you can tell him we've arrived and your services are no longer required." "No, I'm not house-sitting," Chloe said. She reached beside her and picked up a crisp manila folder, the one containing the copy of the deed. "I'm not sure why Uncle Sam didn't tell you. He gave me the house. It's mine now." She said the words simply, without malice or triumph. She was stating a fact, as one might state the color of the sky. But to Maddie and Trevor, it was as if she had just detonated a bomb. Trevor let out a bark of incredulous laughter. She's joking. She has to be joking. Your uncle is probably just trying to teach you some kind of bizarre lesson, Mads. He's an eccentric old man. He is a generous old man, Chloe corrected him quietly. She stood up and handed the folder to Trevor. Perhaps you should look at this. It's all perfectly legal. The deed was transferred and recorded 2 days ago. Trevor snatched the folder from her hand and ripped it open. I can picture him, the stockbroker, his eyes trained to scan documents for profit and loss, now scanning a document that represented a total, catastrophic loss. I watched his face in my mind's eye, the confident smirk faltering, the color draining away, his eyes widening in disbelief as he read the legal, irrefutable language. This is insane, he muttered, the paper trembling in his hand. He looked at Maddie, his expression no longer one of amusement, but of dawning panic. He actually did it. The old fool actually gave it to her. And that was when Maddie's carefully constructed composure finally shattered. The mask of the sophisticated event planner, the blushing bride, the entitled daughter, it all fell away, revealing the furious, terrified child beneath. "No!" she shrieked, the sound so raw it made the gulls nesting on the roof cry out in alarm. She lunged for the folder, snatching it from Trevor's hand. Her eyes scanned the page, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "No! No! No! This is a mistake! It's a trick! My father would never do this. This house is mine. It's my inheritance." "Actually," Chloe said, her voice still maintaining its impossible calm, "Uncle Sam said he wanted it to go to someone who would appreciate the memories more than the market value. He said he wanted it to be a home for an artist, not an event space for a manager." The final words were a direct quote from me, a small surgical twist of the knife that I knew would cut the deepest. Maddie's face contorted with a rage so pure it was almost primal. She looked at Chloe, her cousin, the poor artist she had spent a lifetime scorning. Now standing on the porch of the house Maddie considered her own, the legal and rightful owner. The injustice, in her warped view of the world, was more than she could bear. She whipped out her phone, her fingers jabbing furiously at the screen. "I am calling my father right now!" she screamed, her voice echoing across the quiet, sunlit beach. "He will fix this! He will fix this!" She put the phone to her ear, her entire body vibrating with fury. And I, sitting in my quiet study 100 miles away, watched my own phone light up with her name. I let it ring once, twice, and on the third ring I answered, ready to deliver the final, devastating truth. I answered the phone with a single, neutral word. "Hello? Dad!" Maddie's voice exploded through the speaker, a raw shriek of fury and disbelief. "What have you done? What is the meaning of this? Why is Chloe here, claiming you gave her our house?" I let her rage wash over me, a chaotic, powerless storm. I didn't interrupt. I let the torrent of accusations and questions exhaust itself. When she finally paused to take a ragged breath, I spoke, my voice the calm center of her hurricane. "It is not our house, Madison," I said, using her full name, a name I hadn't used since she was a child in serious trouble. "It was my house, and now it is Chloe's house. The meaning is quite simple. I gifted it to her." "Gifted it to her?" she screamed. "The poor, pathetic artist who can't even afford her own rent? You gave away my inheritance to her over me, your own daughter?" "Let's be clear about something, Maddie," I said, my tone sharpening just enough to cut through her hysteria. "An inheritance is not a right. It is a gift predicated on love, respect, and a shared sense of family. You forfeited your claim to that gift the moment you chose to get married without even telling me. You decided I was not a truly important part of your new family. Therefore, the legacy of my old family, the home your mother and I built, no longer concerns you. The logic was simple, brutal, and inescapable. I could hear her sputtering on the other end, her mind scrambling for an argument, a loophole. But our honeymoon, she wailed, the fury now cracking into a pathetic desperation. You said you would arrange it. You told me the house was ours for the week. You lied to me. Did I asked, a cold irony in my voice. I told you I would see what I could arrange. And I did. I arranged for the legal owner of the property to be present. I believe Chloe is being a very gracious host, considering the circumstances. I could hear Trevor's voice in the background, a low, angry murmur. Tell him we'll sue. Tell him this is illegal. He can't just do this. Trevor says we're going to sue you, Maddie shouted, parroting his words. This is elder manipulation. You're not in your right mind. Oh, I am more in my right mind than I have been in years, Maddie, I replied, and for the first time I allowed a hint of the steel in my soul to enter my voice. And please tell Trevor I would welcome a lawsuit. My attorney, Bill Peterson, has all the documentation. The deed transfer is ironclad. And a public discovery process, one where your and Trevor's financial records would become a matter of public record, would be illuminating. Are you sure you want to open that particular book for the world to read? Dead silence. I had called their bluff. I knew, and they knew, that their carefully curated image of success was a house of cards. A legal battle would expose them completely. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a pleading whine. Dad, please, she begged. Don't do this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't invite you to the wedding. It was Trevor's idea. He said you'd just make it complicated. Please, just call Chloe. Tell her it was all a big joke, a misunderstanding. We just need the house for the week. We'll leave, I promise. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt at manipulation. Blaming her new husband, minimizing her actions, bargaining. It was the desperate gambit of a player who knew she had been checkmated. No, Maddie, I said, my voice final. There are no more jokes. There are no more misunderstandings. There are only choices and consequences. You chose to treat me and the memory of your mother with contempt. The consequence is that this house, this sanctuary, is now in the hands of someone who will treat it with love and respect. Chloe is the owner. If you wish to stay there, you will have to take it up with her. But what are we supposed to do? She cried. We're here. Our luggage is on the driveway. We have nowhere to go. You are a resourceful woman, Maddie, I said, the line a cold echo of her own ambition. You're a professional event planner. Consider this an unforeseen event. I'm sure you and your husband can manage. And with that, I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down. I placed it gently back, in its cradle. The storm had passed. I had held my ground. I had protected my wife's legacy. But there was no sense of triumph. Only a profound, aching sadness for the daughter I had lost and the one I had just been forced to disown. The silence that filled my study was not peaceful. It was the sound of a door being locked forever. Back at the beach house, the world had shrunk to the size of a sun-bleached porch. Maddie stood there, phone still clutched in her hand, her face a mask of stunned, impotent fury. The finality of my words, the cold, locked door of my decision, had finally sunk in. There would be no rescue. There would be no last-minute reprieve. Trevor, who had been listening to the entire brutal exchange on speakerphone, was the first to crack. His facade of the confident alpha male stockbroker dissolved, revealing the petulant, entitled man-child. Beneath? So that's it? He snarled, not at me, but at Maddie. He's cut you off? Completely? I thought you had him wrapped around your little finger. I thought this house was a sure thing. Shut up, Trevor, Maddie hissed, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation. Just shut up. Shut up? Don't you tell me to shut up, he shot back, his voice rising. This whole marriage, this whole plan was based on what? You were bringing to the table. The family money, the beach house. What am I getting out of this now? A wife with a mountain of debt and a father who hates her? It was a brutally honest transaction summary. Their marriage, stripped of its romantic pretenses, was a business deal, and the primary asset had just been liquidated. I could picture them there. Two partners in a failed venture, already turning on each other, searching for someone to blame. While their ugly argument devolved into a litany of bitter recriminations, Chloe made her final move. She had been standing, quietly in the doorway, a silent witness to their implosion. Now, she stepped out onto the porch, her expression not one of triumph, but of a sad, quiet pity. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear and calm, cutting through their toxic back and forth. They both stopped and stared at her, as if suddenly remembering she was there. "I am the owner of this property," she stated simply, the words carrying an authority that infuriated them both. "And while I understand you are disappointed, you are now trespassing. I need you to collect your belongings and leave." Maddie let out a sound that was half scoff, half sob. "You're kicking us out? Your own cousin?" "You are guests who were not invited," Chloe replied, her gaze unwavering. "And frankly, your presence is disturbing the peace." She gestured towards her easel, where a half-finished watercolor of the sea was drying in the sun. "I have work to do." That was the ultimate insult. To be dismissed not out of anger, but out of a simple artistic imperative. To be seen as nothing more than an inconvenient distraction. Trevor, in a last-ditch effort to assert some form of dominance, sneered. "Fine, we'll go, but this isn't over. We'll find a hotel, a better one than this dump." He made a show of pulling out his wallet, ready to flash a platinum credit card, and that is when Chloe delivered the final, most exquisite humiliation. It wasn't a move I had instructed her to make. It was a stroke of pure, intuitive genius, born from a lifetime of being underestimated by her cousin. She held up a hand. "Actually," she said, a thoughtful expression on her face, "I feel a little bad. It is your honeymoon, after all, and it's getting late. Finding a decent room on a Friday night without a reservation will be difficult and expensive." A flicker of hope appeared in Maddie's eyes. Was Chloe about to relent? To offer them a place to stay out of pity? "So," Chloe continued, her voice thoughtful, "I'll make you an offer. You can stay, for one night, in the guest room, the one with the view of the driveway, not the ocean." Trevor's chest puffed up, sensing a victory. "Well, that's more like it. A little family decency." "But," Chloe added, her voice turning crisp and businesslike, "it is a rental, my rental, and the nightly rate, given the last-minute booking and the emotional inconvenience, is $500, payable in advance, in cash." The silence on the porch was absolute. The demand was so audacious, so perfectly tuned to their materialistic worldview, that it left them speechless. She had taken their own transactional language and turned it back on them with surgical precision. She wasn't just kicking them out. She was pricing their desperation. Trevor stared at her, his mouth agape. He looked at his wallet, then at Maddie, his face a mask of pure fury. The idea of paying his wife's poor artist cousin $500 to stay in a house he believed was his by right was a humiliation too great to bear. Without another word, he turned on his heel, stalked to the car, and threw his designer suitcase into the back seat with a violent thud. "Get in the car, Madison," he ordered, not looking at her. "We're leaving." Maddie stood frozen for a moment, her face a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Rage at me, hatred for Chloe, and the dawning, terrifying realization that she had hitched her future to a man who would abandon her at the first sign of financial inconvenience. Defeated, she turned and followed him, a queen without a kingdom, a bride without a home. I received one last text from Chloe that evening. It was a photo of her watercolor painting, now complete. The sea was turbulent, the sky bruised with the colors of a coming storm. The caption read simply, "All quiet now. The house is breathing again. Thank you, Uncle Sam." I looked at the picture, at the beautiful, tumultuous sea she had captured. The storm had passed, and the cathedral of my memories was finally, blessedly, at peace. The drive back from the coast must have been a long and silent one. I imagined them in that cramped convertible, the wind whipping around them, two strangers bound not by love, but by the smoking crater of a failed business plan. The illusion they had built together, the shared dream of a life funded by my legacy, had evaporated in the salty afternoon air. All that was left was the bitter residue of blame. I didn't hear from Maddie for 3 days. I didn't expect to. Pride, especially the false pride of the entitled, needs time to nurse its wounds. But the silence itself was a message. It was the sound of her world shrinking, of the safety nets she had always taken for granted being cut away one by one. The first tangible sign of the fallout came not from her, but from my sister. Janet called me on Monday evening, her voice a dry, satisfying report from the front lines. "Well, the prodigal daughter has returned to the city," she said, forgoing any preamble. "And it seems the honeymoon is well and truly over. One of Trevor's golf buddies is a client of mine. The word at the country club is that Trevor is telling everyone he's the victim of a bait and switch. He's painting Maddie as a liar who misrepresented her family's wealth. He's already moved his things out of their apartment." "So soon?" I asked, though I wasn't surprised. A partnership built on greed dissolves quickly when the assets disappear. "Apparently," Janet continued, "the final straw was the bill for the wedding. You paid for the venue, but they were responsible for all the upgrades, the premium champagne, the ridiculous ice sculpture of a swan, the A-list photographer. The bill came to over $30,000. Trevor assumed her inheritance would cover it. When he realized there was no inheritance, only debt, he walked. He told his friend, and I quote, "I didn't sign up to be a bailout package for a broke social climber." It was a cruel, transactional end to a cruel, transactional marriage. They had seen each other as assets, and when one asset failed to perform, the merger was dissolved. There was a grim, poetic justice to it that I couldn't deny. I spent those days in a state of quiet productivity. I didn't celebrate. Revenge, I was learning, was not a festive occasion. It was a somber, methodical rebalancing of the scales. I worked in my garden, my hands in the soil, finding a familiar comfort in the cycle of planting and pruning. I organized my library. I spoke with my financial advisor, not about Maddie, but about restructuring my estate to better benefit the charities Eleanor had supported. I was cleaning my own house, both literally and figuratively, and then on the 4th day, Maddie called. Her voice was unrecognizable. The arrogant, demanding tone was gone. The bright, false cheerfulness was gone. All that remained was a small, broken whisper. "Dad?" "Hello, Madison," I said, my voice gentle but not conciliatory. "He's gone," she said, the words catching in a sob. "Trevor, he left. He took his car, his clothes. He even took the espresso machine he gave me for my birthday. He said our marriage was based on a material misrepresentation." She choked on the legalistic phrase, a final cold twist of the knife from her stockbroker husband. "I'm sorry to hear that, Maddie," I said, and I meant it. I was sorry she was in pain. I was not sorry for the circumstances that had caused it. "Sorry?" she cried, a flash of her old fire returning. "You're the one who did this. You ruined everything. If you had just given us the house, none of this would have happened. He would have stayed." "Do you hear yourself, Maddie?" I asked. My voice still quiet, refusing to be drawn into her storm. "You are not mourning the loss of a husband. You are mourning the loss of a financial arrangement. You're angry because the man you married, the man you chose, has revealed himself to be exactly as shallow and materialistic as you are. The only difference is that his calculations were more ruthless than yours." She was silent, the truth of my words an undeniable blow. "You built a life on an illusion of wealth, Maddie," I continued. "An illusion funded by me and leveraged against a future you hadn't earned. Trevor didn't leave you because I gave away the house. He left because the illusion vanished, and he had no interest in the reality of the woman who was left behind. The question is, do you?" Her sobbing was the only answer. It was the sound of a woman who had spent her entire life curating an image, only to find herself completely alone when the facade finally crumbled. There was no one left to impress, no one left to manipulate, just the stark, empty reality of her own choices. The lesson was beginning to land, not as a lecture from her father, but as the cold, hard consequence of a life poorly lived. The weeks that followed were a study in silence. The angry phone calls stopped. The pleading texts ceased. From my sister Janet, I received periodic, concise updates. Maddie had been forced to move out of the high-end apartment she and Trevor had shared. She couldn't afford the rent on her own. The luxury convertible was repossessed. She was staying on a friend's couch, a humiliating step down for a woman who had defined herself by the glamour of her surroundings. Her event-planning business, once a source of immense pride, began to falter. Her reputation had been built on an image of effortless success and high-level connections that had come primarily through Trevor and the social circles my money had allowed her to enter. Without him, and with the whispers of her disastrous honeymoon spreading through the city's elite, clients began to cancel. The calls stopped coming. The illusion of her success, like her marriage, had been a bubble, and it had burst. I felt a profound sadness for her, but it was the sadness a doctor feels for a patient who has refused the cure and must now endure the full course of the disease. This was a necessary fever. It had to burn away the toxicity before any real healing could begin. I did not reach out. I did not offer a lifeline. To do so would be to invalidate the lesson. She had to find the bottom on her own. One evening, about a month after the disastrous honeymoon, I was at the beach house. Chloe had invited me for the weekend, not as a guest of honor, but as family. The house was transformed. Canvases leaned against the walls, alive with vibrant colors. The scent of turpentine mingled with the salt air. The porch was no longer a stage for social performance, but a functional workspace, splattered with drops of paint like colorful freckles. The house felt more alive, more honest than it had in years. Chloe and I were sitting on the deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and violet, when my phone buzzed. It was an email notification. The subject line was simply, "From Madison." My finger hovered over the screen. Chloe, sensing the shift in my mood, looked over. "Is everything okay, Uncle Sam?" "It's from Maddie," I said. "Are you going to read it?" she asked, her voice gentle. "I suppose I have to," I said. I opened the email. It was not the angry, accusatory tirade I might have expected. It was something far more unsettling. It was a spreadsheet. The file was titled Repayment Plan. I opened it. It was a meticulously detailed list of every major expense I had ever covered for her. Her college tuition, the down payment on her first apartment, the cost of the BMW she had totaled, the countless smaller loans and gifts. She had somehow compiled a near-complete financial history of my generosity. Beside each item was a column labeled Amount Owed, and next to that, a column labeled Projected Monthly Payment. At the bottom was a grand total that was staggering and a projected payoff date sometime in the late 2070s. There was no apology in the email. There were no words of remorse. Just a single chilling sentence at the top. "For your records, I will begin making payments as soon as I have secured adequate employment." It was the most Maddie thing she could have possibly done. Faced with the emotional and moral bankruptcy of her life, she had retreated to the only language she truly understood, the language of transactions. She wasn't seeking forgiveness. She was trying to settle a debt. She was attempting to reframe our entire father-daughter relationship as a series of loans, reducing decades of love and support to a cold, hard number on a spreadsheet. It was a desperate attempt to regain control, to turn her moral failure into a manageable financial problem. "What is it?" Chloe asked, seeing the look on my face. I handed her the phone. She read the email, her expression shifting from confusion to a deep, profound sadness. "Oh, Maddie," she whispered. "She still doesn't get it." "No," I said, taking the phone back. "She doesn't. She thinks this is about money." In that moment, I knew what my final move had to be. Maddie didn't need to be punished anymore. She was living in a prison of her own making, a world where love was a liability and every relationship was a transaction. She didn't need my anger. She needed a final, definitive lesson in what truly matters. I stood up and walked to the edge of the deck, looking out at the vast, indifferent ocean. Eleanor and I had stood on this very spot on the day we bought the house. "This place isn't an investment, Sam," she had told me, her hand in mine. "It's a legacy, not of money, but of memories. It's for the person who will remember the sunsets long after they've forgotten the property taxes." I knew who that person was. It was the young woman standing beside me, her hands stained with paint, her heart full of a quiet, unpretentious love for this place. My daughter had sent me a spreadsheet. I was about to send her a legacy. Not the one she wanted, but the one she desperately needed to understand. The spreadsheet was a turning point. It was a final, desperate plea from a daughter who didn't know how to ask for forgiveness, only how to negotiate terms. It was, in its own sterile way, a cry for help. But helping her no longer meant writing a check or making a phone call. It meant delivering the final, most profound lesson of all. I didn't reply to her email. Words were useless now. Action was the only language left that could possibly break through the transactional fortress she had built around her heart. 2 weeks later, Janet called. Her voice was somber. "Sammy, I think you should know. Maddie lost her job. The company downsized. She's not in a good place. She's selling her furniture, her designer clothes, anything she can, just to make rent on a tiny studio apartment. She's hit rock bottom." "I know," I said quietly. And I did. I had been waiting for it, the final, complete stripping away of every external validator she had ever clung to. "What are you going to do?" Janet asked, a rare note of uncertainty in her voice. "I'm going to do what I should have done a long time ago," I said. "I'm going to show her what a real inheritance looks like." That weekend, I drove back to the city. I didn't go to Maddie's new grim apartment. I went to my lawyer's office. When I returned to the beach house that evening, I was carrying a single thick envelope. Chloe was there, working on a large canvas, a seascape that had captured the fierce, beautiful soul of the place. I sat on the porch and watched her work. For a while, my heart filled with a quiet certainty. "I need you to do something for me tomorrow, Chloe," I said finally. She turned, her brush poised in midair. "Anything, Uncle Sam. I need you to host a small gathering. Here, just for family. I've asked Janet to bring Maddie. I told them it was a final meeting to discuss the disposition of the estate." Chloe's eyes widened, understanding the weight of my words. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" "It's time," I said. "The house has been cleansed. It's time for the family to be too." The next day was gray and overcast, the sky the color of slate. It felt appropriate. Janet arrived with Maddie in tow. My daughter looked like a ghost. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple, generic attire. The confident, arrogant woman who had demanded my keys was gone. In her place was a pale, thin, exhausted-looking person with shadows under her eyes that had nothing to do with a lack of sleep. I greeted them on the porch. Maddie wouldn't meet my gaze. I led them into the living room, where Chloe had arranged some chairs. The house was filled with the clean, sharp scent of her oil paints. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice calm and formal. "I've called this meeting to make a final announcement regarding this house and my estate, to avoid any future misunderstandings." Maddie flinched, no doubt expecting a final public condemnation. I turned to Chloe. "Chloe, my dear, when I gave you this house, I told you it was a gift of freedom, and you have honored that gift more beautifully than I could have ever imagined. You have filled this place with life and creativity. You have become its soul, and for that, I am eternally grateful." I then turned to Maddie. She finally looked up at me. Her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "Maddie," I said, my voice softening, "you sent me a spreadsheet. You tried to put a price on our relationship, on a lifetime of love. You believe that your inheritance is a number, an asset to be acquired. You were wrong." I picked up the thick envelope from the table. "This house, it was never about the money. It was about the memories. It was about your mother's laughter in the garden. It was about you building sand castles at the water's edge. That is the true inheritance, and it's something you cast aside." I opened the envelope. Inside, there were no legal documents. There were photographs. I took them out, one by one, and laid them on the coffee table. A photo of a 5-year-old Maddie on my shoulders, laughing, on the beach. A photo of Eleanor and a teenage Maddie, arms around each other on the porch swing. A photo of the three of us, covered in flour, after a failed attempt at baking a pie in the small kitchen. A lifetime of happy, sun-drenched memories, captured on film. "This," I said, my voice thick with emotion as I gestured to the pictures. "This is the inheritance, Maddie. This is the fortune you were so desperate to claim and so willing to throw away. It's not for sale. It cannot be leveraged or liquidated. It can only be cherished." Tears were streaming down her face now, silent and uninhibited. She wasn't crying for the loss of a house. She was crying for the loss of herself, for the person in those photographs she no longer recognized. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered, the words finally breaking free, raw and genuine. "I'm so sorry. I forgot. I forgot what was important." "I know," I said, "and that is the greatest loss of all." I stood up. "The house belongs to Chloe, and that will not change. My financial estate will go to charity. Your spreadsheet is irrelevant. There is no debt to be repaid because the currency you stole, trust, love, respect, cannot be returned in monthly installments." I walked to the door. "My legacy is not a house. It is the memory of your mother's love and the hope that one day my daughter will remember how to feel it." I left them there then. My sister, my niece, and the broken woman who was my daughter. I walked out of the house and down to the water's edge. The tide was coming in, washing the sand clean. I didn't lose a house. I found my peace. My daughter lost a fortune, but in doing so, she was given a chance to find her soul. Sometimes the most profound act of justice isn't about taking something away. It's about showing someone the true value of what they already had, and then letting them live with the quiet, aching emptiness of its absence. The healing, for both of us, would be a long and difficult journey. But for the first time, it felt like we were finally walking in the right direction. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story about the true meaning of legacy resonated with you, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. I'd love to read your thoughts, so please share your impressions in the comments below. Until next time, remember to cherish the memories, not just the assets.